Welcome, everybody. How we doing? How is this event so far? Is it good to be out again and traveling? Even though it's Vegas, right? Who likes Vegas? You like Vegas? All right. So welcome, everybody, to our onboarding new hires panel discussion. My name is Kevin Grossman, president of Talent Board and the Candidate Experience Awards. We are a benchmark research organization that helps companies improve their recruiting, hiring, and of course, their candidate experience, hence part of our namesake. So what I'm gonna do is let each of our panelists introduce themselves briefly, and then we're gonna dive in. Sound good? Okay, so Greg, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Greg Russell. I'm head of talent acquisition at Snapdocs. We're a mortgage tech startup. We're 530 today. We've grown from 110 the day that we went in lockdown 2 years ago. So pretty rapid growth. And I believe that recruiting is storytelling and storytelling is culture building.
Amen. Thank you. Danielle, what about you?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Monahan, and I lead our talent acquisition function, talent acquisition and global mobility at Uber. The corporation, so we're talking about corporate Uber today, and the corporation has about 22,000 people today, and we're growing it quite significantly this year. We have three distinct business lines, as some of you may know: the mobility business, delivery business, which used to be Uber Eats, and the freight business.
Excellent, thanks, Danielle. And then, of course, Vinay, tell us about you.
Hello. So I'm Vinay. I'm the CEO of Process Street. We are a people process platform. We handle employee onboarding, workflow automation, approvals, the team's handbook, and more. We're a Series A startup, so about 60 people. But we also, because employee onboarding's our favorite use case, we have hundreds of customers, big and small, that use us for employee onboarding. So we have a lot of insight into both things that we're testing internally at Process Street, but also what our customers are doing.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. All right, so let's dive into it. So in our benchmark research that we run, we focus on pre-application all the way to onboarding. And one of the things that we find every single year is the more stuff that happens with your new hires before day one. Post day one, of course, is extremely important, but before day one really helps as a retention starter out of the gate. And we're not talking just about getting the paperwork out of the way. We're talking about things like immersing them in the organization, even if it has to be done virtually, introducing them to their team members, meeting their managers, learning more about the company culture. We've got some great ideas that we had talked about already, even before this session, about what to do with onboarding. But there's a lot, and the more that happens, the more positive the sentiment of your new hires and their willingness to be there at the organization, right? And as a retention starter out of the gate. So what I want to start with, Greg, with you is, what are the things that you focus on? What recommendations do you have that you embed in your process, pre-board to onboard, before day one? And what about internal employees? Keep in mind, I'm infamous at asking 8-part questions, so hang in there. But anyway, still start with you, Greg.
So I'm going to go right back to the theme of storytelling, right? You know, the candidate, the very first time that your recruiter or your sourcer reached out to the candidate, they started telling them a story about your company. And, you know, hopefully that was a really good story. The candidate certainly bought it, right? And now they're getting ready to start with you. And so you don't just stop telling that story, you know, as soon as they sign the offer letter, right? So I think pre-boarding and onboarding, it's just another phase of storytelling. Before that candidate becomes an employee, or while they're becoming an employee, and then that storytelling continues when they're an employee, right? The employee experience is all about storytelling as well. And so, you know, yes, I think absolutely there's a ton of information that the candidate needs, and you know, tools and you know, their laptop and all of this stuff, right? But at the same time, it's super, super important that you're continuing to tell the story. It's maybe a shift, right? It's a little different story and a different way of telling it, but you know, that onboarding, pre-boarding process is like a bridge between that candidate experience and the employee experience, and it needs to be equally great, right? And it really needs to encompass the story of your company, I think.
Absolutely. Danielle, another thing that always blows my mind every year in our data, less than 40% of the new hire candidates tell us that they are actually talking to their manager before day one.
Yep.
I mean, that seems pretty dismal to me overall. So tell us, Daniel, about what you're doing at Uber in regards to ensuring a better day one at the organization.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at Uber, but I'm not saying that we're doing it 100% right or the way we should be doing it.
Always a work in progress.
Always a work in progress. So as a little bit of a step back, just the practicality of great pre-boarding and onboarding in the market that we're in. Onboarding has always been important, and some companies have been great at it, some not. Pre-boarding has been neglected, very sadly neglected. But if you think about how can you get an edge on your competitors by making sure, A, folks show up for day one. Back in the old days when I was younger, you sign your offer, you show up. Today, not necessarily. So your candidates ghost you, and particularly where you have long notice period. So in the US, 2 weeks, maybe they will show up, maybe they won't. But in EMEA and APAC, you have 3-month notice periods. So you've got to make sure that you're keeping your candidates warm. Get them to show up. That's your pre-boarding, excited, energized, engaged. Their laptops must be there. They must have emails that work, access to Slack, know a little bit about the company, have expectations about the job, and then your onboarding experience is what keeps them at least through the first year.
You've read our research, haven't you? No,
course.
it's right on the money.
Of
And
course.
Vinay, communication and feedback are super critical throughout the entire process, but especially for your new hires, whether they're from the external or they're people moving internally, whatever the case is. So give us some examples of not only what you're doing at Process Street, but with your customers and what recommendations you have from that.
Yeah, totally. So pre-boarding is a big part of what our platform does at Process Street. We kick off from the ATS and handle pre-boarding and can do it in lots of different ways. So 2 areas that our customers see a lot of benefits are, one, kind of what Danielle was saying around the engagement side. You want people to turn up, you want them to be engaged and feel part of the culture. And then on the second side is around actually improving productivity of those employees and making sure that they're getting ramped faster and they're more productive to start with. So some examples would be Salesforce is one of our biggest customers. We do lots of different onboarding flows for them. We handle their M&A onboarding. So we, for example, onboarded all of Slack into Salesforce. So that was 3,000 people, 2 very different cultures. They had this kind of integration day that they were working towards when the Slack team was kind of needed to be integrated into the Salesforce team. And they were very worried about the cultural clash that was going to happen with that. And so through pre-boarding, through our workflow, we're basically able to kind of send out all these kind of nudges and videos and content to the Slack team to educate them on the Salesforce Ohana way and the culture and Benioff and getting them to drink the Kool-Aid and kind of so they're not so surprised and don't have such a big culture shock when they arrive and they're more engaged and can be kind of integrate and be more productive in that new organization. So lots of stuff around that, right? Through pre-boarding is getting them to watch old All Hands or getting them to learn about the volunteer programs or the benefits or things like that so they can get integrated into the culture and be more engaged and excited to start. That's kind of one. The other one is on the productivity side. So one thing that we have lots of our customers do is, for example, during engineer onboarding and through the pre-boarding phase is kind of giving engineers the ability to kind of work, learn at their own speed and learn faster if they want. So, for example, we'll integrate content around this is what our code base is like. This is how you do a pull request from GitHub. This is our architecture model and design. And teaching them all about the code base well before they start and giving them the option to actually go in and do stuff and set up their environment and do some small pull requests. And we've seen results where engineers, for example, have done their first pull request 3 weeks before their first day and fixed their first bug on their first day. Because by the time they've gone through pre-boarding, they're already ramped and they're ready to go. So lots of benefits in pre-boarding.
That's great. And it especially today, I mean, it's a bonkers upside down recruiting and hiring world right now, right? For many of you and for if not all of you out there. And there's so many things each year that impact the business. Obviously, early on in the pandemic, that impacted Uber tremendously. And now unfortunately with inflation higher than it's been in I think 40 years, and the Fed's about ready to raise interest rates that might impact your business, right? And then just overall with prices being higher, I mean, it's nuts. And now we've got a war we have to worry about. Even though it's halfway around the world, it's still closer than what we all think. So it's crazy town right now. But the fact of the matter is, though, again, as I mentioned earlier, communication and feedback are huge when it comes to not only the onboarding, but you've got to start with those final interviews, right? And then the timely offers, and then when the offers are accepted, getting those folks on board. So, Danielle, let's talk a little bit about technology and how that, because that's a big part of recruiting and hiring.
Yes.
How has that helped and or hindered the onboarding process? And I know Vinay didn't want me to ask that, but I mean, but you know, in all transparency, right? Because it is a big part of what we do, but it can also get in our way too, right? If we don't turn the dials correctly. So tell us about Uber.
Yeah, so I think there's a delicate balance also to strike between what you push via technology and then where you have a personal touch. And I think you have to be very, very thoughtful about that. Now, I love technology. I would automate anything and everything any day.
Absolutely.
But that personal touch cannot be underestimated. And so I like to do sort of love bombs before somebody starts, letting people talk to a hiring manager.
Love bombs.
Write
that down,
to a peer,
everybody.
Sending some swag. And when you're sending swag, you know a little something about the person. You know, do they have kids? So send some swag for the kids, because if the kids like where you're going to go work, you're probably going to show up. Or if they have dogs, you know, send something for the dogs. So just do a good balance of strong technology and a personal touch. So high tech and high touch.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. Anything kind of a welcoming basket, a welcoming gift or whatever else does go a long way. And we see that positive sentiment kind of bump in our data and research as well. By the way, some of you figured it out that you can ask us questions. And if you, through the app, and you can post those. We'll get to some of those in a bit. And but Greg, let's go to you next about the same question. How has technology helped and or hindered your processes?
Yeah, I'm a lot like Danielle. I think there's so much value in automating as much of the process as you can, obviously, right? But there's no replacement for that human touch,
Especially at the point of onboarding.
Yeah, especially at the point of onboarding, right? And just the communication, right? So we run a fast, organized, highly communicative recruiting process, and so it would be crazy not to do the same thing in our onboarding process, right? And so we do the same thing. We communicate a ton in pre-boarding, even before pre-boarding, right? When the offer is going out, we get the whole interview panel, whoever has met that person. Hey, we're sending an offer out to Danielle. Can everybody please send her a note about how excited that you're going to be that she joins, right? And so this is a genuine, you take the time to actually handwrite, so to speak, this note, right, on your email. So things like that, and just a ton of communication. And then when we get to onboarding, we still do a ton of kind of in-person sessions, right? There's a lot that's automated, but for instance, every Friday I run a session live about our operating principles with all our new hires. So it's a half an hour kind of interactive session where I talk about the operating principles, and it's incredible actually. The feedback that we get from that stuff has just been really great. And I think so the technology is an incredible tool. I think where it hinders you is if you overly rely on it, right? If you think, okay, great, well, I've loaded my process into this tool and now I can never think about it, or I don't have to ever think about it again, right? Like, no, of course you do. You need to constantly be thinking about it and iterating on it to make it better,
So, and I love the handwritten note thing, even though you and I in the speaker room before we started talked about how we can't read our own printing, so that's a problem. But no laughter for that one? Come on.
I'll laugh.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it. So Vinay, let's add on to that, especially give us some other examples of how you're working with your customers how technology does improve the communication, especially all the way up to day one and even beyond. So.
Yeah, totally. So I think where technology breaks down, and it's kind of been brought up here already, is when it's not personalized. When somebody comes in and they start using a tool and it makes them feel like a number, not a person. Go look at like Workday's onboarding task list, and it's like, yeah, okay, you got a black and white screen. It's like, oh, fill out your payroll information, your I-99 or something, and that's kind of it. And you're like, okay, I guess this is what every single person at this company has done. I'm not unique. I'm not special. This was not designed in any way for me. And so I think like really trying to leverage technology to make the experience feel personalized, and then allowing the HR team to basically personalize at scale is where I think technology really adds value. Because obviously if you're doing a lot of hiring and onboarding, it's difficult to get really personal without leveraging technology in some way. So again, like what Process Street does is like we allow these very like robust, customized, unique onboarding experiences that can be tailored to individuals, individual roles, individual countries, departments, et cetera, et cetera. And so based on like, oh, you're an executive and you're coming in from Japan, you can have a very personalized experience that kind of understands the challenges and culture that particular person is experiencing and adapts the onboarding experience to them. So I think leveraging technology for personalization is key.
No, it is key. And just by a show of hands, how many of you out there leverage some kind of technology to keep your new hires warm up until the day they start and even post? Okay, we good. We got a smattering of them. How many of you give your new hires some kind of a welcome thing, welcome gift, note? Ooh, a lot of hands. Good. Excellent. And then how many of you, and it's not necessarily, I know, in your purview all the time, try to encourage the hiring managers to contact the new hires before day one? Good. You all get an A, all right? So here's the thing. The candidates, and I've been ranting about this for the past few years, candidates only care about one thing. That's getting hired. That's it, right? And they don't care about your tech stack, your people, your processes at your organizations. They don't care about any of that. But most won't get hired for any given job that you're recruiting for at any given time. But you still control all the dials, right? Everything that we've been talking about already, the people, the processes, the technologies, how often they're getting communicated with. And that impacts everything about their perception of fairness and their positive or negative sentiment about wanting to work at your organization and their willingness, especially after they start, and again, what their employee experience about does go hand in hand with candidate experience, that's another story, but their willingness to refer others too, based on that early experience that they've had at your organization. So, Vinay, let's go back to you on this one. And now we're gonna, so it's one thing to get everything in place and all the work that you've done with not only your own organization, but your customers, but it's harder to sustain over time because of things that keep happening and impacting the business, like we've already talked about, right? So what are you doing and what are your customers doing and how are you helping them sustain a quality onboarding experience over time?
Yeah, so I think I don't know if anybody saw our booth or saw like the questions that we have with the common challenges in onboarding, but one of the big challenges that a lot of our customers tell us that they have is lack of visibility into onboarding. Like they don't know who are all the current employees being onboarded, what the state is, what hiring manager they're waiting on, what things are waiting on. They don't have visibility into it. It's emails and spreadsheets and disconnected Slack messages, and there's no way to kind of like roll all of that up and see like how it's performing. And if you can't measure how it's performing as like a single workflow, then you can't tell if changes that you're making are improving or hurting that workflow. So, that's kind of, again, one of the things that we offer on the platform is like we let you basically iterate kind of like a software product or something, your workflows, so you can kind of track, okay, this is like, our 90-day turnover, turnover within the first 90 days based on, version 1 of our onboarding flow. And then you can watch as you like iterate that and tweak it to version 5 and version 10 and version 15, and you can see like how that's impacting the metrics you care about, 12-month turnover, 90-day turnover, engagement, retention, productivity, stuff like that. And so I think like not having visibility into how the onboarding is performing like restricts people from being able to consistently keep it up to date and make sure that it's performing at the highest standard.
How many of you ask your new hires for feedback about the hiring experience? Before, I mean, up to day one, yeah? Yeah, okay. And then post-hire too, you do follow-up 30, 60, 90, et cetera? Okay. How many of you ask your rejected candidates for feedback? Ooh, good. You all get A's, the ones who raise their hands. Okay. So, Greg, what about you? How are you sustaining a quality onboarding experience at Snapdocs?
So, going back to the beginning of the pandemic, we weren't sure, everything kind of flipped on its head, right? We went fully remote, and we weren't sure what this experience was going to be like, if this was going to kind of degrade the experience, et cetera. And we quickly figured out that actually, no, because we had set up a really good process that was fast, a hiring process that was fast, organized, right, highly communicative, and an onboarding process that was the same. It didn't actually matter whether people were getting that experience face to face or whether they were getting it on the other side of a video call, right? And so we didn't really make a ton of changes, really almost any changes during the pandemic to our processes. And so now, like going forward, I think it's just all about, kind of monitoring feedback with all those tools that we talked about. It's, constantly kind of thinking about the process and iterating here and there, right? We've got a dedicated team, in the people org. We've got 2 people on our people experience team is what we call it. And they're responsible for pre-boarding and onboarding. And they do an amazing job, and they are constantly kind of looking at that feedback, bringing the feedback to the greater people team and the talent team, and they will call something out like, hey, I think it's time to evolve this, or it's time to change this, right? So it's just having that really active eye on it, and not just setting it and forgetting it. I think it's really important to kind of always iterate.
Right, because I mean, many of you the virtualization will continue, and you've probably got a lot more. You've been hiring even more remotely too, right? For some of your organizations, and you're onboarding that way too. And how many, we all love looking at ourselves on the video screen, right? It's so much fun. No, it's not. So, in fact, we were talking about that before we started. The tricks that we use of like closing that window and having other documents up while we're talking so that we don't have to see ourselves. It's not about seeing you, our team members and others. It's about seeing ourselves. Anyway, we're going to get ready. Danielle, why don't you add on to how you're sustaining a quality onboarding experience at Uber, and then we're going to maybe check in with some questions that we've been getting.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I think we do similar things. We're not as sophisticated as Vinay's workflows in tracking how each onboarding cohort performs, but you've given me some really good ideas here. Thank you. But we do track very closely our retention, 90-day and 1-year retention. A random comment here. One thing that we did learn about, we saw our turnover tick up a little bit in the first year, and we did a deep dive into why is that happening? What are we not doing? Turns out 2 really simple things. We, both in recruiting and the hiring managers, didn't give the candidate a true view of the job. So they'd often come in and be a little surprised.
Little shock.
Yeah.
Sticker shock.
And that's very easy to fix. And then the second thing that we didn't do well, I think we were overly optimistic when we discussed promotion tracks. And so candidate would come to a year and think, oh, I'm probably going to get promoted, and find out not. And, we didn't do a good job setting expectations.
That's tough. It is tough to be consistent about setting expectations, but it's also super critical for any of our experiences, period. Thanks for sharing that, Danielle.
So random, but hopefully helpful for
it's really
somebody.
important. Greg, did you want to add something?
Well, I was just going to say, it's interesting that you say that, because we have experienced the same thing at different times with the recruiters, just slightly overselling, some of those things like promotion track, or what comp adjustments are going to look like, or whatever, right? And so it's easy enough, as you say, to like kind of figure out that that's happening, and then just some coaching around, hey, let's not get too ambitious here with some of the stuff, you know.
All right, thank you all so very much. Let's take some questions. There's some good ones that I found here. I like this one a lot. I think it's an important one to ask because we're talking so much about the company investment in pre-boarding before they start. But how do you encourage the candidates to dedicate time in participating in pre-boarding when they're not getting paid until the first day? Especially probably for hourly employees. I mean, that's one. So anybody who wants to tackle that? Vinay.
So I can talk not so much to the hourly employees, but the way that we do it with a lot of our customers is we don't tell them that they have to do it during pre-boarding. It's like an optional move at your own pace choice. And so not every new hire wants to do it. Not every new hire has the time to do it. Like maybe they're very busy in their 2 weeks wrapping up in their previous job. But there's a lot of people who maybe they have time. They have a couple of weeks before they're starting. Maybe they even have a whole month before they're starting. And they've chosen to take some time off or whatever. And, we're a startup. We work in a competitive, fast-paced environment. We look for people who have similar cultures. And so a lot of the people that we hire, they are interested in moving faster. They do want to work. They care about their careers. They want to learn more. And so they choose to jump in and do it. But it's not something you can ask people to do, I think.
Or mandate people to do,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, same.
Same, yeah?
Same.
Yeah, we certainly kind of give some very friendly and persuasive nudges here and there sometimes, but I agree with Vinay. I think, we find most of the candidates, the vast majority, just, they jump on it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because they're excited to get started, and it's typically not hours and hours of work or anything.
No, we're not. Yeah, absolutely not. We're almost to the end. Another question that came in had to do with the fact that, some of you maybe are losing more employees than usual. Attrition is higher in the first 90 days. I don't know if that's impacting some of you or not, depending on who you're hiring for and what. And I think this kind of connects, Danielle, to what you were talking about, expectation setting. But what can we do? What can organizations do pre-day one to kind of ensure even greater retention? We've talked about a lot of things, but once that happens, TA is a lot more involved in talent management. I'm hearing that from especially larger and even more smaller high growth companies. But how do we ensure that retention ongoing? Because we're all perpetual candidates at any given time. We are, even if we're gainfully employed and happily employed. Anybody want to jump on that one?
I think it's about making sure that you have a great experience, right, for your employees. I think the 90-day thing. We've been super lucky. I think we haven't really experienced almost any of that at all. We really don't lose people before the first year. It's super rare, and that means that we didn't make a great hire. There was some mismatch, I think, that we missed, but because we run a great process, that doesn't really happen. But I think ongoing for retention, it's about making sure that you have a great experience, that you're I happen to think it's about having a culture that's based on empathy. I think it's about treating people like grown-ups, giving people autonomy, right? Like giving people all the reasons to stay, and it's rarely ever about money, right? Or purely about money. I think it's about that experience and that story, that you're continuously telling, your folks about the culture and about what it's like to be there, and hopefully that they are buying into that story so much, and that they're living and loving that story so much, then they turn around and become the storyteller too, and then they just kind of don't think about leaving, until they reach their expiration date at 3 or 4 years or whatever that is.
Exactly, and that's the theme I've been hearing in many of the sessions, today and yesterday as well, from HR and TA leaders. Did you want to add something, Danielle?
Well, no, I did want to add that retention is not just a recruiting.
Oh, of course not. No. That's the whole organization, right?
Co-owned and co-accountability. But if you lose folks in the first year, sometimes it's not a great manager. It's not that you necessarily mishired. There could be other things impacting that.
I think that's an important thing to underscore as the clock runs out on us too, right? Is that it's a whole organization endeavor to ensure it's and that's one thing that business leadership needs to get right. How important onboarding is as well as retention.
I mean, manager training and coaching,
Yeah.
right, is an incredible retention tool. Just to your point, right? People leave because of a bad manager often. You know?
Of course, this still holds true. Did you want to add something, Vinay?
Just plus one, like good hiring and onboarding takes a village. It's not.
Yeah,
it's
it
not
does.
like I think expecting talent to own it all is one of the big reasons that creates not the most magical experience. And I think having the whole organization focus on creating that magical experience for new employees can really make a difference.
Excellent. Well, I think we are out of time. Yes, is that right?
We are out of
Well,
time.
and thank you very much, Vinay, Danielle,
Thank
and
you.
Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference, all right?